Welcome back, everyone. Galactic Storyteller here. I want to explain that for the last couple of weeks, I have been in Arizona taking care of my sick father. So I apologize that I have not been able to do any recordings or interviews. But today I'm really excited because I have Elisa E with me today. I want to give a warning. As usual, we are talking about subjects that are not appropriate for children. So if you have little ears in the room, please either come back and watch us later or take time to go into the other room. We are going to be discussing MK Ultra and related issues. So take this time to check in with yourself. If you are programmed or feel like there may be a trigger, you might want to watch with a safety person or take it very slowly. So with that, I'm going to read a little bit about Elisa's bio, and then we're going to dig into her book and her experiences, Our Life Beyond MK Ultra, Now, or Then and Now. So Elisa E is a survivor of MK Ultra programming, born in New Jersey in the early 60s. Her story crosses the MK Ultra trauma-based programming that the era and runs into technological advances in the 1990s, taking her into remote programming and accessing. And this is via eMK Ultra, and we're going to explain the difference as we get going in the interview, as well as cloning technologies occurring in the late 1980s programs. As a survivor and support person to other survivors, she chose to update these books in 2022 as a witness to what is occurring globally since late 2019. Her insights remain pertinent due to the eyes to see and ears to hear beyond the narrative and into the esoteric agenda she has lived through, as well as some of her prophetic proclamations, from early deprogramming playing out. Many of Elisa's interviews on various alternative media, internet, radio shows can be found online. Some have been removed by whom we don't know. Additionally, Elisa wrote articles for several issues of Paranoia magazine. So Elisa, thank you so much for joining us today and being gracious enough to explain to us how MK Ultra programming works and your experiences.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Madeline. It's my pleasure.
Sure. What I would like to do is start out by explaining to the audience, you were not brought up LDS, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but through your experiences with MK Ultra, you've had several brushes with the LDS Church?
Yes, yes. I believe that my interactions with the church were because of my involvement with various intelligence agencies.
Okay.
And that's how the connection was made to the church at the higher levels.
Were you brought up in a religious atmosphere or you had no religious training?
No. My parents were both brought up in one in Catholicism and one in baptism, Southern Baptist. So I remember as a young girl just occasionally going to a Methodist church. They were trying to find common ground, but nobody was devoted. No.
Okay. All right. So what was your foray into the MK Ultra program? How did you find yourself in that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure which side of the family it came from. There's Navy on both sides. I did have an uncle, a maternal uncle, who was working on a base in the mid-60s, and he had a security clearance. There was some very interesting things going on in the base, and I wouldn't find that out until many years later when I started having memories. And then my father was in the Navy, but just a grunt as far as I know.
That's so common to see that military thread.
Especially Navy. ONI is big in mind control. Very big.
Okay. Do you know what
ONI being the Office of Naval Intelligence.
Okay. Okay. And so do you know what the top organizations are that are involved in the MK Ultra program? Military being one.
Well, now I would say a lot of corporate military contractors. Some of the biggest corporations you can think of, I believe, are involved. Absolutely. Okay. And just, I don't want to name names as far as corporations, but the names of the programs have changed. Those who are running them have changed. I know there was SAIC. I don't know if they were military contractors, kind of took over for years, but I don't know if it's moved on from there. So as far as military or intelligence, pretty much all of them, meaning they're all involved to some degree. I was on military bases, army bases. I was involved with, I had interaction with FBI. I was very much involved with CIA members, or so I was told, members of the CIA. And I believe DIA is big on it too. And now it could be NSA, Homeland Security, it could be anybody is involved, anybody and everybody at some level.
Okay, who was responsible for bringing you into the program as your hand?
Well, my father was a pedophile, so I'm having to guess at this, the various possibilities. Maybe he got caught and was offered to be let off the hook if he offered up. But there's also a part of me that at times believes that my parents were literally brought together to create children. So because of just who they are and their backgrounds, and in my mom's case, kind of her bloodline. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure how I got farmed out eventually. So that, but I knew at a very early age, I was being traumatized, tortured by some military men. They were in military clothes. They were in Navy denims. So that was at 6 years old, and that was in New Jersey. So, and then on my mother's side, I know my grandfather was at times a contractor for, you know, certain military installations up there. So particularly Navy. So.
Wow. So that would be similar to Kathy O'Brien's story, in that her father was a pedophile and was likely offered a deal. You either hand over your daughter or we prosecute.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I don't really know where it started, because I mean, my father, just being in the Navy for a couple of years, I can only imagine his psych profile. He was really messed up. So, you know, when they target, how they target, they don't have to offer him anything. They can just take somebody. So that may have been the case, that they knew there was already things going on through him. Right. That's just a guess. I've read some things that was in the 70s through Walter Boart's work, Operation Mind Control. And I recommend that book to everyone. The researcher's edition is the one you need to read, and that's over 800 pages. Wow. But he talks about what was happening in the military, particularly the Navy, what they were doing to people in the Navy back in the 70s. So this is, you know, literally wiping memory. They would sign someone up for a special project program and then wipe 2 years off of their life. And these people didn't really realize that until, you know, years later. So so it's very possible that this all happened through my family being in the Navy.
Wow. So if this is too personal, you don't have to answer this. Were you the only one in your family as far as the children that were brought into the program? And if you don't want to know, and so if you don't want to say anything more on that, just sometimes there's a prime or a selected child.
Well, I do believe that my entire family was involved, victimized and involved. And the reason I say that is this works on the micro scale and the macro scale, which is what we're seeing happening now. You have to control the entire environment. Otherwise, you're going to have people in the family saying, wait a minute, what's going on here? You know, what's wrong with the kid? There's missing time, she's disappearing. So you really have to control everyone. I believe that my mother had eMK Ultra programming, possibly even, well, I won't get into that. My father obviously did a lot of the programming, not in a technical official sense that I know, but in sexual abuse and incest. He primed me and started the dissociation, or they had him started. I really don't know. As far as my brothers, I mean, everybody in my family is in denial. So I left them many years ago. I had to exit with love.
Mhm.
But to me, yeah, everybody on some level. I don't think my brothers were used to the extent that I was, but I know one of my brothers drew, when we lived in New Jersey, drew a very elaborate underground tunnel system with military in it. So where did he get that idea? No, I don't know.
That's a common theme, the underground tunnels and the military. So for what purpose were you brought into the program?
Well, I would say that I'm have referred to myself as high level,
Mhm.
meaning not that I'm high level, but the people that have had access to me are high level. And when you have someone like that, I've met others, the people that have access to them, generally the amount of energy and money they put into programming you, you have a lot of uses, meaning you'll have various altars with different skills and abilities. My main use was for sexual activity and kill programming.
Okay. And how long did that go on for?
A very long time. Yeah, a very long time. It started early and they continue to reinforce your programming. Plus, when you're in the midst of things like what I had to do, that reinforces your programming. It's pretty horrific. So
Mhm.
you continue to be traumatized. I started self-harm and what I thought was suicide attempts in my early 20s, shortly after I started kill programming on my own, meaning they were sending me out on task. So the breakdown started pretty early, but they just kept reinforcing. And I didn't find people who really understood what was happening to me
Mhm.
until I was 46. So I was having memory breakdown long before that, but I didn't have anywhere to go. It was very different then for
Yeah.
me. I went to ufology meetings and conferences because I had the alien programming too. But I knew there was something else, military and so forth. But you weren't allowed to talk about it back then, not the meetings I was in. And now it's, my labs and over
Mhm.
the top super soldier stuff. So, which I have an opinion on all of that.
Oh, I want to hear that.
Well,
We're gonna
it's
get to the UFO stuff in a little bit. So say what you like on that or not. But what I would like to do is, if you don't mind, in your book, one of the things that you have done for the readers, which I appreciated on behalf of everyone, because most people don't understand the terminology or what's happening in the system. So I would encourage everybody who wants to understand how programming works, the purpose and the journey that you took through your experiences, to get your book. In the back, you explain the terminologies and what happened. So what I would like to do is, if you could first explain what altar system means inside of the individual.
so I have had various groups of altars. So they'd be a system of altars, and within the system it could be broken up. In my case, it could be broken up into rooms. I had a lot of memory recall of trying to get out of rooms, meeting other altars in rooms, various scenarios, really ingenious. One was um, me pursuing an altar to get to know her and not being allowed to get too close, but it's showing itself to me. So there's systems involved, and you can have several systems in one victim. Um, and like I said, it would be grouped. For example, all the sex altars were grouped together and run by, they would reinforce each other, but they were run by certain entities. That's the truth of it. So yeah, so there's various systems. There can be various systems within one person.
And does one system acknowledge or is aware of other systems, or is everything isolated and cordoned off, so this system remains unaware that this system exists?
Absolutely. As far as, for example, having front altar system, had no idea, or I should say my main front altar had no idea. And I consider that one of the strongest systems because things would show up in the world around me, wounds and whatnot. And I had to find my way through it, knowing there was that main front altar had to know that something happened, but she can't get at it. So there, it's very actually really complicated. There are always altars that are managing other altars, and there's even reporting altars. So if part of the system starts to break down, you might have an altar that will it will take over the body and call the handler or controller and explain what's going on. So some don't know anything, absolutely nothing, and others do.
I've worked with individuals that their recorder altar will report back to their handler, this is what she's doing, she's trying to get help.
Yes. Yeah,
And
that's
so yes, and so then the handler can reinforce programming or call it suicide programming or even kill programming to the therapist.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
so
And they expose this in My Own Worst Enemy. They actually showed that in that show. That show got canceled really fast, and it triggered the bejeebies out of me. This was back quite a ways back. I'd have to look up what year, but I wrote about it in the book, and they actually showed one personality reporting on the other personality.
I'm gonna have to find that.
Oh, everybody should see what they showed. It's not a lot, like I said. And I believe it was to test things, and I think it went over the top. I think they probably had people being triggered all over the place, and they yanked the show.
Oh, wow. Because they have to be able to control when somebody's triggered or when the dormant programming needs to be activated, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, and they'll do what I call callbacks, which is there was one for me in 2007. There was one for me in 2008. Is that right? 2006 and 7, or 7 and 8, on September 11th, 2 years in a row. And it was like I was being turned on. And I believe what they do is they're checking systems to see how they're working, and if because they're probably getting ready to use the person or for end time programming, checking to make sure systems were running. And if not, they got to pull them in and do some reinforcement and reprogramming.
So callback programming, that means you have to check in with the handler or the programmer,
No, they do it.
Check your systems.
They do it. Well, there's probably a variety of ways to do it. Mine was apparently done remotely.
Oh.
And I woke up to it and knew I was already, quite a ways into knowing that something was going on seriously, quite a ways into that. I couldn't explain it. I didn't have the terminology, but it was very clear. I remember one of those years I woke up and thought, I'm on, as if I was something was turned on.
So you knew.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And that show I was talking about, they had a commercial on the commercial break to go to a website they had. And I was already waking up, but I'm telling you, I was literally salivating to go to that website, and I knew not to. So they were trying to pull people in. And literally the advertisement was, if you can relate to Edward on the show, go to this website, so on and so forth. It was amazing to watch that show. Yeah, I got so triggered. One of the guys I was working with was watching it as well, and he called me to get me off the TV. And when he called, came out of being in the bathroom in the bulimic altar. I was over the toilet. I didn't even know I was in there, and went to the phone and had to gather myself. He kept me on the phone. But about a week later, they played the show again, and I shored myself up and I sat and watched it, and it was absolutely stunning. And I went into, while I'm watching it, the show's here and another screen showed up here, and I was having a whole nother experience. So there's no question in my mind that show was heavily armed for MK Ultras. I'd love to hear from people that, I've never talked to anyone else that, but I'd love to hear, somebody else's experience of what that show did.
Okay, viewers, you heard that. So if you have any experiences, please either put it in the comments. If you're not comfortable with that, you can contact me at galacticstoryteller@gmail.com, and I will make sure Elisa gets that information, because surely you are not the only one.
No.
So what was happening inside of your mind when that was going on?
Well, I was aware enough to know that the second time, when it was just really fast. The screen, my vision started to go, but I could still see the show, and another screen showed up, and it was a graph of some kind. And I'm wondering at this point if it was, which we'll get, I know we're not supposed to go there yet, but the eMK Ultra, if I was hooked into someone on the other end, and that's where the screen flash came in. I really don't know.
Okay.
But it was clearly, I could feel myself fading out into something else, and then I came back.
I always, when I'm working with these individuals that have experienced dissociative identity disorder, because I have not experienced that, what I see in my mind, and maybe you can correct that or not, is when I've been under anesthesia and all of a sudden I feel like I'm being pulled back, and then it's gone. The consciousness is gone. And I don't know if I have a correct picture of what you're experiencing or what you have experienced. That's the closest thing I can come up with. Is that
Well, that can be valid in that could be very valid in full use time, where it just shuts off and you don't know until you come back and time is missing. But in deep deprogramming, when I was up in Salt Lake, I was staying with a man sent in as a potential handler, not romantically staying with him, but he was the one that introduced me, so to speak, to Truot.
okay?
And when I was with him, we had an experience at his home after a trip to the Temple Square with him and one of the men, not Truot, the other man. His name's Lynn. And we had after doing a tour and standing waiting, it's a long story, I won't do the whole thing, but we had a threat. Lynn and I did, before the other guy came back with the car. He was gone an unusually long time. And that night, late, I was sleeping on his couch and I watched him. I heard this dog start barking, and this dog was barking outside. Somebody's dog was barking for like 20 minutes, and I knew they were coming. He had made a phone call on the way home. I think he was reporting. And he stood before me, and this is the kind of guy that would grab his gun, run outside, and he'd shoot somebody. He would drag him in the house, you know. And I watched him standing across the room go completely into trance. And I started speaking to him because I knew what was going to happen. We're both going to go, and these guys are going to come in. And so this was my one really profound experience of being aware enough to feel it happening. And what happens is time, literally time, starts to slow down. Slow. You can feel that you're leaving and something else is going to come. But everything around you slows down. And I just kept very calm. I wasn't at all frantic, and I was using a very strong voice and saying his name. And there's men outside, and they're coming now. You need to come out of it because they're coming. And he just stayed in trance, and I just slowly faded out. And it wasn't until the next morning that I woke up and I had physical symptoms of that the men had come in the room. And I don't know what all they did. That would be the day I left his home. But I had it happen several times in deep deprogramming where it just starts to end. It's as if you can't stop it. Now I don't experience that at all. So
That's amazing. So with deep programming, what exactly does that mean for the viewers? Can you explain a little bit about what happens in deep programming?
well, what'll happen when your programming is breaking down, which is an apparently organic process. is that you will start having alters showing up with memories. And my take on, I've got to explain this, because my take on it is that they layer in the programming in a very sophisticated manner. They also layer in how you're going to deprogram. So when you start to wake up, what I experienced was they'll send out the kid alters, or they'll allow the kid alters to come out first, that it's set up this way because most of them are very emotional, they're very frantic, they're up and then gone. And it's not that they're not important and that they don't have very important information, but for people on the outside, it just looks like you're losing your shit. And then, there's deeper alters with more important information. In other words, especially with kill programming, those alters didn't show up for a long time, as far as in the deprogramming process. So they'll even have something that is called flooding. That's what I call it, flooding. And maybe that's an official term, I don't know. But they will, once they can't stop the process, they'll overload and let things just pour through, so that you may be getting bombarded by alters, suicide programs, self-destruct programs, and I recall trying to work and, having 5 self-destruct programs go off in a day.
Oh, wow.
With various alters and losing, coming in and out of consciousness. So deprogramming to me is when you get to a place where, first of all, you have to know this is real and this is happening, which can take a long time. It's crazy making. And because it's like, why me? I don't understand. Why would this even be happening? It took a long time to figure that part out. But engaging those alters and their memories, they will keep surfacing until you find a safe way to engage them. And I mean safe by, you don't want an alter taking you back to your handler. You don't want kill alters running your show for the day. But they will come up, and for me, what happened is they started coexisting with me. So I could be in a place where it's right here with me, where there's 2 of us. And maybe the other person that I'm engaging doesn't know that, but I'm struggling in my mind. I'm getting influenced by it. I noticed that this is one telling thing. Look in your closet and let's see what kind of clothes you have and how broad the spectrum is. It was very interesting to me to be aware that I would go to the store and I would wind up in a section and it's like, I don't wear this. Or in the lingerie section, in deprogramming, fighting, getting certain things. So there's a lot of process to it, but the truth of it is, for me, I did have a safe person to report everything to, and he promised me I would fill his voicemail and just keep calling until he emptied it. And he just promised me he would listen to everything. And we would talk when we could. It was long distance. So I had a person I could unload on, I could download on. But engaging those alters, and that can be a really difficult process because of where they've been and what their memories are. I was unaware of this, not my highest self now, but my front personality had to do this, my main front alter. And she was completely unaware of all of this. So it was literally like re-traumatizing if you're not careful. I didn't have a therapist or a deprogrammer. I don't believe in deprogrammers, by the way. I think you should beware of deprogrammers. There are a lot of therapists nowadays that are very aware of this. And even a lot of victims who have now become coaches or therapists that can deal with people that are going through this. So it's a different situation, but it was pretty much just me and my alters.
In your book, you list a number of alters and what you know about them, their purposes, their personalities, things like that. How many did you ultimately end up discovering, roughly?
Well, I can't say with absolute certainty. I know what I put there, but there were groupings. For example, one of the systems was what I would call a crystal chandelier. And it was triangle shaped crystals like this, and they were, you know, put together, and it was this massive chandelier. And what I knew was, if I couldn't believe this, it's like, what do they do? I mean, how many different things can you do? But I understood this to be sex halters, both child and adult. And some of the pieces, some of the crystals were missing, which I found really interesting. But my understanding is that I have had hundreds, if not 1,000 or more, of fragments. Now, that's not full personalities. Those are, for example, with the child sex alters, when they would surface, it was like a freight train. It would just be, bam, she's here, does this, does this, does this, and then she's gone. I got really clear that most of them have no concept of the world. They couldn't function in the world. They're just literally fragments. And then there's I don't know how many were in there, but there were the whole personalities where they could interact in the world. Some people might notice some of them, some may not notice them at all. There might be just a different sensation about me, a different countenance, and you know, more withdrawn or more aggressive. But there were quite a few of those too that were whole personalities, but nothing like the fragments. And I did have an experience where I was shown, and I have written in great detail in the book. It was a very profound experience in my first year in the astral with the characters I call Cain and Lilith and Lucifer. And the reason I bring that up is because they were showing me my altars and how many of them were programmed. They were using flies and moths to show me this in a room with Lucifer. And that was kind of when I realized the amount of what's in me, and that they had done this. And when I say that, they had done this through the humans that they utilize. But it was disgusting. The whole experience was absolutely mind-bending, but I was in an altered state, slightly altered. This was early on, they were trying to draw me, you know, fully back in. And so I would have these astral experiences with them pulling up certain altars, but I was present. The I you see now, the higher person that's connected to divine. I was present and able to take all this information and start to understand what was going on inside. I hope that's not too confusing. It's very detailed in the book.
Yes, it is. And you explained it very well. What I would like to do is go back to something you said regarding the kid sex alters. So I'm just curious, and you don't have to be too detailed about this, just whatever your comfort is. But when you are in a mature woman's body, and then the child sex alter comes forward, that's all in behavior and attitude. And so that's for somebody who is deviant and they want to be with a child. And then your alter behaves in that way as a child, correct?
Well, it would start out as when I was a child.
Okay.
And as you grow up, you still have those alters. So someone would engage an adult woman who's acting as a child.
Okay. Wow, that's messed up.
Yeah. Yeah, there's pretty much every kind of perversion you can think of in this game.
Wow. Okay. Would you mind explaining the difference between total mind control with MK Ultra and eMK Ultra, which you refer to in the book, which is referring to electronic, correct?
Correct. Directed energy weapons.
Okay.
They call them dues, and I do just find that in the back in the lexicon. Yes, I apparently transitioned from not only the trauma-based mind control of MK Ultra, which utilizes torture, trauma, sodomy, drowning, shocking, electric cattle prods, hooking you up, to machinery. That was a very sophisticated I call it an esoteric science because there is a very esoteric side to it, but it's a technology, it's a science. They had it down. And then eMK was a term that I'm not sure who coined that. I know I first heard it from my friend Alana Freeland, who has done tremendous work regarding directed energy weapons and written several books. And that can be all done remotely. It doesn't have to be. They're still doing trauma-based mind control, but we're now looking at MK Ultra has gone global. So they can pick anyone, anywhere, anytime, at any age, and start working on them from afar without any hands-on at all.
How do you protect yourself from that?
Very good question. And I won't go into too much detail, but you better get an inner life, and you better do it fast and make it sincere and make it the whole focus of your life. Because I can vouch that, you know, early on in deprogramming, I had more of a sense of trying to protect myself physically until I realized they'll always, always outgun me. They're big, global, massive. So I started turning to spirit and realizing that the trick is to ground your soul forces in your spirit, in the body, in the mind, in the heart. And it's not that that stops something from coming my way, because I did transition into a lot of remote technologies. I actually believe they were using remote on me as early as the 70s. But I know that a lot of the official claim is that, you know, this started later. But I have memories that suggest they were using remote technologies. But in deep deprogramming, they started doing a lot of stuff remotely. And so it's not so much that it doesn't make me invincible, but it makes me sovereign. And it took me quite a few years to realize that getting out means bringing your soul forces back. It doesn't mean that, you know, you're not sold off according to the government to a lesser, you know, a lesser group to be experimented on, or, you know, those things can still happen. But if you start to return those soul forces to yourself, and I know that it sounds abstract, but it's not. It's really a process. It's a discipline. It sounds vague, but it's not. You become more empowered. And I remember the moment that with the remote stuff and in deprogramming, that I lost my fear and I stopped being afraid. And whatever came my way, I engaged it in a way to record it and share it with people, to share it with the people that want to know, that might help others, you know, understand. So I actually became the watcher. And that's what I feel that I am now. I'm the watcher, and I will speak about it. My remote technologies have lessened tremendously over the years, but there were periods where they were, you know, clearly working from afar.
Well, I think
even in cases of, in one case, there was a period of over a month that when I was just dropping, and this actually happened several times, not just that 1 month, but it was almost like there was something they were doing for a few months and then it would stop. But when I was dropping into sleep, there was this forced exhale right at that moment where you're almost going unconscious. And several times I caught it. It pulled me out rather than me dropping in. And on one occasion, this was years ago, I don't believe they have to do this anymore, I got the view from behind the guy sitting at the monitor that was hooked into me, meaning brainwaves to brainwaves. Wow. He had stuff, electrodes on. There was a huge screen that was a graph that was flying from the left to the right, which was obviously the readout of what was taking place. I knew his eyes were closed, but it was as if I was standing behind him, and it was just split second. And I would learn from Dr. Robert Duncan, who designed programs and then became a whistleblower. He talked about all this stuff. he said that this could happen. I would read later that it was a glitch in the system where it could reverse, and we could be watching them as opposed to, and that's what happened. Is it reversed?
Wow.
Why, I don't know. I do know that I have a tremendously strong life force, a very strong will to survive. I don't do so well in the world sometimes, the physical material world, but in this instant, I think that was part of it. There was something, I was quite awake at this point. I had already started years ago, started deprogramming, and that I was able, without even realizing how or why, to reverse it. So I say that, but they don't need a guy at a monitor anymore.
Mm-hmm.
This can be done on the DNA level now, so that they're reading someone's DNA and utilizing those frequencies, so they can go direct off a cell tower, a satellite, any of these weapon systems, which we call technology. So smartphones, sorry folks, but
Yeah.
your smartphone is has a mini HARP antenna in it. It was not designed as a phone, it was designed as a weapon. So they are sending stuff
quite
through.
extraordinary.
It's not just pulling data. It's the purpose of it was to be able to send through. So they are sending through the phones.
Right.
Absolute. So just know that.
You know, and it's, I think you and I both know, and probably many of the listeners, that the military is light years ahead technology wise than what they release to us. So I don't have a problem at all believing the fact that in the 70s they would be able to have that type of technology. And if you think about it, it's really extraordinary that they could take two people and link them frequency wise to send information using one person to you. But I'm betting that was a surprise that you could link back to them.
Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
So they were using it to send things out, but also to retrieve things. And
Wow.
I believe Dr. Robert Duncan also referred to this. He called them psychic warriors.
Mm-hmm.
That people were in those facilities were doing this. But again, we're already past that.
Right, absolutely. So what I would like for you to do is explain what abreaction is.
Well, the caution of self-deprogramming is that, and I had several, some more significant than the others, where I would relive an experience, and physically and everything. The wounds would show up, the pain, the bruises, and I would believe, this was very early on, I would believe that it happened that night. And then with the processing afterwards, and I would go into total dissociation, not necessarily into an altar, but sort of into an altar, just completely disconnect. And one of the worst ones was a lot of physical pain and emotional, mental. I tried to go to the store to get something to help and had a breakdown in the store. And so it took me a while to realize that it wasn't that night. It was many years ago on that date.
But your body is releasing the memory and reliving the trauma as though it were.
And that would happen sometimes repeatedly on the very serious ones. Each year in deprogramming, something would come up regarding that until I made peace with it. And it's an altar too that's bringing it forward. So that's an abreaction, is not just having the trauma memory surface, but reliving it fully. And it can set you back a little bit, if you're not able to work through that, which I did. It took me several days to realize, and then weeks after to really process what had taken place.
I worked with an individual many years ago that when she would start to remember, her hands, her legs, and her face would feel like it was melting, like she was so hot and on fire. She couldn't focus on releasing the memory or letting the details come to her consciousness because the physical pain kept her from doing so. And so that's a programming thing.
I still to this day will occasionally experience what I call internal heat. And it's literally, you feel like you could breathe fire. But if you touch for me, if I touch my skin, it's cool. But my inside, when I urinate, it's hot. You know, everything heats up on the inside. Now, some people would say, well, that could be microwave weapons too, which is very possible when you go to move into memory that things get, you know, shot at in your direction these days. But it makes perfect sense to me. I would start to shake, that I would feel, and what that, it took me a couple of years to realize what it was. It was that was the altar trying to surface the memory. It was trying to take over, and my whole body would start to vibrate. So it makes sense what she said. It makes a lot of sense. And they can do, you know, depending on the programmer, they can do any number of things to facilitate that. It could be many different reactions, physically, mentally, emotionally, that they program in.
That's amazing. What I would like to do is switch gears here and dig into the Mormon Church. Are you good with that?
Sure.
Okay. Right off the bat in your book, in the foreword, you mention that organized religions like the Mormon Church are engaged in incest, pedophilia, mind control, and Satanism should come as no surprise, although it will to people in the Mormon Church and those trying to exit. Dying institutions whose once good intentions have fled often devour their young. So I found this really incredible that on the first page, you mention the Mormon Church right off the bat, and yet you don't have a Mormon affiliation other than being used by them.
Actually, that is the foreword by Ilana Freeland.
That's Ilana Freeman. Okay.
That is her writing. And the reason she put that in there was because she knew of my involvement with the church. She knew it was a big, big deal. And actually, back a ways, not even that long ago, it was not really common knowledge in my circles for people to talk about the Mormon Church. So yeah, they're, in my opinion, they're really, really big in mind control. And I've met several. I was living in Moab, Utah for a while, so I've met several victims, quite a few.
In your book on page 210, you are referring to, you've got a couple of things on the Huntsman's family, which is a big predominant Mormon family. So I would encourage you guys to go read that. We're not going to dig into the family affiliation at this time, but you're talking about being programmed at the LDS Conference Center during a ritual that is known as Cain's Garden in the early to mid 2000s. Can you tell us
early 2000s? As a matter of fact,
okay,
that was kind of scary for me because I started deprogramming 2008, 2009, and that was a little too close for me. Early 2000s. But I believe that scenario was actually at first down in the center when I come upon a group of gray-haired men and women. These were common in several programming sessions. This was the first time I had women, and they were sitting in the front. They were the only one. There was one woman that engaged me. I've had the men, older men in suits in other episodes. I will say this very honestly. I have yet to figure out whether these were physical people or an internal council, which I would learn of this through Fritz Springmeier's work, that you can have an internal council placed in. And so some of these episodes, I'm not sure if I was there physically or this was all on the astral level. And I know how that sounds, but these people know how to do this, okay? They've been interfering with the astral for us for decades now, and that includes dream time. But so there was an episode of very particular things. It's kind of bizarre. I go through it in the book of what took place downstairs, and then I wound up on top, up on the top where the pyramids are, and there was this is how I believe it was being set up. I was being programmed downstairs, and what took place up top was to seal the programming in. So up top was, I can't tell you exactly how it went. If you read it in the book, it'll sound really bizarre, but there was clearly a ritual that took place up there. And due to some of the things that were present, meaning on a very esoteric level, not just downstairs was more physical, material consciousness programming. Mm-hmm. And then upstairs was more of an esoteric ritual. And a lot of times they'll do that to seal in what they've just programmed. It sequesters it and seals it in.
Looking back now, do you think it's strange that the Elias Conference Center has pyramids on top of it? I mean, what's with that?
Well, like one sweet little woman they sent me off with when I went back on my own and played stupid. Oh my gosh, the stuff she said. And then she would catch herself. Poor thing. I mean, she was probably totally programmed herself. But when we got to the top, I pointed. Now, I'd been there several times in deprogramming, but I wanted to go with a woman. I don't know if you know this, but when you walk in the door, there's women to greet you over here. And then there's a bench way over there with a couple of guys sitting there. And they watch the interaction. And if you seem like nobody and you don't know what's going on, you go with a woman. And that's very interesting, to go with one of the women. But if you seem like you know what's going on, one of the guys will get up and come over and take you. We've even been stopped as a group and made to stand in a room, and they radio and they bring in a heavy hitter, because the guy that we had wasn't even heavy enough because of what we were talking about and what we were discussing. So I went back and went with this woman and just said, "Oh, this is such a pretty place." I just wanted to see it. And so, "Oh, okay, I'll take you." And we get up to the top, and I'm looking at the pyramids, and she's talking about something. And I go, "What are those?" And she goes, "Oh, those are the pyramids." No, those aren't pyramids. No. Those aren't pyramids. Those are skylights. Yes, those are skylights. Just like that. And she did this like 3 times in different areas, because I knew just what to point to or ask a question to. But yeah, no, those aren't pyramids. Okay. And my take on that is they're apparently over that big, close to that big auditorium. Mm-hmm. And one of the men I worked with, he believes that it's an energy draw from all the people. That it's literally pulling out the energy and sending it to the real programmers.
Just like they did in Egypt, which, for those viewers that have watched a number of my videos, you understand that the Mormons have a connection through the Merovingian bloodline, which is represented through the bee, but it goes all the way back to Egypt. So you have to look at all these esoteric little symbols in order to really understand what it is they're doing and saying. So I
don't know how many of your viewers have been in to the auditorium, but when you walk in the auditorium, mm-hmm. the ceiling is a massive mothership that has parked in. I mean, it's absolutely stunning.
And in there, but I don't know if I remember looking up and seeing the ceiling.
It is about it. Massive. And it's this curved with lights. It's got windows with lights. And I mean, it looks like a mothership pulled in and parked partway in. Absolutely incredible.
They could be alien.
Well, you know, alien, demonic, there's a correlation there. Right. I'm sorry, but there is. We're talking about dark elementals there.
Absolutely. And you had also mentioned that with as many gray-haired men in suits that there are with the times that you have gone into Salt Lake, be it on the astral plane or physically, that there are a number of women that are really in power. What do you know about that power structure and where the women stand, because on the outside, women are pretty suppressed in the Mormon church, and it's the men who hold the authority. But that may not be completely true.
Well, my feeling,
Esoterically.
it's not relegated LDS Mormon. My feeling is the occult in general,
Mhm,
that if you really, not that there aren't very adept and powerful Black magicians that are male,
mhm.
which by the way, you don't know them. People don't know them. They don't want to be known. They're layered back. You know, they got all kinds of people in front of them. They're probably living down the street in that cute little place that's a nothing little place with a 1980 car. You know, they don't care about the same things. They don't have the same mentality or consciousness. But it's my take that there are places in the occult where if you were to go down into that room with the throne, it's a woman sitting there, not a man. It's just, and I can't say that I know certain women and so forth, but this is my field, that there's and maybe it comes with my interactions with Lilith. You know, she's a very significant figure in that hierarchy of entities, very powerful, and has been around a long time. And so it's not, I believe we've been made to believe that it's pretty much strictly a patriarchal
Mhm.
issue, and it's not. It's both.
Right.
It's both. It's men and women, both in the perpetrators and in the occult side of magician.
Well, in the Mormon doctrine, it's all Heavenly Father and, his world, and Heavenly Mother is supposedly held so sacredly that we don't talk about her. But
Right.
really, really, I think it's just one more way to remove that feminine power that we actually do have, and that we have a false uh authority structure where men are in charge, when really that everything we know in this world is the opposite of what's true.
Right. Right. No,
So,
that makes a lot of sense. And
okay.
that there's hidden power. Well, you just said it, how powerful women are. I mean, we are that creative, have an
Mhm.
incredible creative energy, ability, and that can be used for dark as well. I just don't want people thinking that, um, it's all men,
Mhm.
because it's not all men. There's quite a mix in there. And
Mhm.
I just feel that a lot of that occult power resides in a lot of women,
Absolutely.
especially looking at a figure, like I said, like Lilith. Yeah.
On page 285, you talk about the rise of the Dark Lord. What are you referring to there?
When I wrote that, I didn't have the name.
Okay.
I believe I do now. And this is through anthroposophy and Rudolf Steiner.
Mhm.
Um, I've become a student of his because he's the only one who's ever explained the beings that I've encountered, and I'm learning a lot from him. I don't know a lot of his material, but um, I had a ceremony with a huge statue, a silver etched statue of a figure of a god, a so-called god, that I was wed to. And I never really knew who that was. And it was through anthroposophy that I discovered who I believe that to be. I'm not going to say his name.
Okay.
I just don't want to put that energy out there right now. I have talked about him before, but I'm starting to think that, not bringing his name in. And so the way I see it now, that was in 2012. And what I know now, I absolutely know, is he's attempting to incarnate here. And whether that means taking possession of an already, born individual, I have no idea timelines or what that means, but it was a very disturbing
Mhm.
download. This being is, in my opinion, is the Antichrist, is the equivalent of what people think of as the Antichrist. He's complete adversarial to humanity and the Christ and all the figures that work for humanity. And so you could call it, in the Satan realm. In anthroposophy, Satan is, as I refer to, as Ahriman.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another character, and he is, my understanding of it is, he is outside of this realm. So we're working with figures like Lucifer and Ahriman. Those are separate beings, by the way. I have experience with that. They are very different personalities and beings. But there's this character, they belong in this. Everything's out of balance. The Christ impulse is the middle way, the Lucifer and Ahrimanic on the outside. And when things get out of balance, it's the Christ impulse through us that needs to bring it back into balance. Mm-hmm. This character doesn't even belong here. This character wants to be in here, and it is nihilistic. So a lot of people associate it with the Ahrimanic, this being, they kind of trade names, that it's Ahriman. It's an Ahrimanic being, which it is in the sense that it's very nihilistic, but it's just pure evil, and it doesn't belong here. And because of being wed to it, even in deep deprogramming, I seem to have this connection some way of feeling things or understanding things related to this being. As a matter of fact, I have a tattoo here that I thought was one thing, and his symbol is within the tattoo. It's not the tattoo, but I would discover through my studies of Rudolf Steiner, who drew a symbol, that it's in there. And then it made sense. The wedding to this big statue, that's probably who it was. And he is known as the two-horned beast. And the statue had the big horns on it. So there's I forget what your initial question was. I don't know if I answered it or not, but the rising up.
Right, yes, the rising of the Dark Lord. So from what
I don't necessarily think, I look at the Mormon LDS church like I look at every other church. Mm-hmm. They're just minions in service to adversarial gods to humanity, to Christ. That's what they are. So back then it made absolute sense to me that it was coming through LDS. But what I believe was happening is that the name Huntsman Jr., the name Huntsman coming to me triggered that they were going for the White House back then, and it was going to be Huntsman Jr. And then the whole Mitt Romney thing happened, and Jr. bailed out, right? But what I see it as now is that what happens in the public view is, for example, Huntsman says, okay, I'm going to give up being ambassador to China and I'm going to run for president. People think that's all that is. What people like myself see is that what happens is I get triggered because it's a symbol, it's a sign to the masses. And I'm talking about the masses in the networks, the masses in the know, the ones that know. There's many layers to that network. And that way they're broadcasting what is next, what's happening, where we're at, without picking up a phone or sending an email. It's hidden in plain sight. And so the way I see that now is that I was aware of something on the esoteric side that was kicking off another level of mind control programming, moving to a larger scale. And that to me is what end time programming. The last 3 years was the kickoff of end time programming. Because what it meant to me was we are now taking MK, what used to be called MK Ultra, global.
I think end time programming is really huge in the LDS church, whether it's been through trauma base or it's just through the church doctrine, because they are huge on end time programming in terms of preparation for the millennial and things like that. So that is a big thing throughout the entire doctrine. And if I'm understanding what you said correctly, with the rise of the Dark Lord, that may be something that happens through a birth, or it may be something that happens through more like a walk-in for somebody who's a spirit walk-in for somebody who is already here on the earth. So in other words, kind of like a possession, correct? Okay, and either one could be a plausible scenario. We just don't know.
And the immediacy for me is very overwhelming, but as you probably know, in visions like this, time is really tricky. I mean, it could be next year, it could be 50 years, it could be 100, I don't know, but the immediacy of it was now. But now, in that sense, is not necessarily right now.
Everything is always in present time.
Right.
When you're talking
this was 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
That I had the understanding that he's coming, or attempting to come, I should say.
Okay. One last question in terms of Utah and the LDS Church. What do you know about Dugway Proving Ground? Because that's a big deal. You can't go out there.
No. The only thing I know, other than hearing, stories like you of what may or may not be taking place out there, is when I went to Salt Lake to meet the 2 guys, I was programmed to one of the guys. It was a potential handler that met me at a UFO conference that took me up there to meet him. It was a big setup is what it was. Okay. This guy didn't know. He's MK Ultra. He didn't know what was going on. So anyway, I stay with this guy for 5 days. The thing happens with the guys coming in after the temple scenario. I leave and I get a room in, I leave, and one of the memories that I had was of my first solo kill. And I was in a casino and took a man to his room. And they had told me about Wendover, Utah, and that there were casinos out there. Now, this was a quarter of a century ago at the time, but I was so driven. I wanted so much to find physical proof of where I was. And so I drove, I don't know if I was on 80 or the other highway that goes out there, but I know that it had all those yellow signs that say, don't go to sleep. Okay. Talk about reverse suggestion.
Right.
And it's total soft sand off the side. There's nowhere to pull off. It is just, you drop in, you're going over. And so as I'm somewhat near Dugway, I had left the program. I did not do what I was supposed to. I left the potential handler. They now knew she's not coming back. So near Dugway, I got hit with sleep program. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And I come to the horn of an 18-wheeler that's passing on my left, and I'm going over under his trailer. And I jerk awake, and this is middle of the day. And again, I keep doing this. And all these stupid signs, don't go to sleep. So I associated that with something with Dugway, but I don't know, but I knew that it was a kill program for me, and, to take me out, because no, she's not gonna follow through. I think she's done. And so there were a couple more jerk awake, and then further on, I was fine. I was fine the rest of the day, and I was fine on the way back. So
that's the power of suggestion,
right?
Oh, wow. Let's move into.
Well, somebody told me afterwards. I went to Salt Lake after that, got in a Motel 6, and the guy I was working with, I told him, I said, the strangest thing happened. And he told me that he's talked to other MK Ultras who have sleep program, and that they could knock you out. So I'm sure it was due to things that would subsequently happen that they had decided I was a no-go anymore.
Wow. You had served your time and your purposes. Okay.
Too awake. And that can happen. I mean, it doesn't necessarily happen to everybody, but that can happen. And there would be several subsequent attempts. And
you basically age out, correct? Yeah. Your programming has a specific time that it's good for, but then it starts to break down after a while.
But it's totally individual. I had a potential handler in Moab who was a sharpshooter. He was in his early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And he was total MK Ultra. Would switch altars and share information with me about the JFK assassination. Wow. And then he would switch, I mean, absolutely terrified like a little boy, and then switch back into his adult altar. They finally did pull him because his program was obviously breaking down, but he was still competing sharpshooting. So, and I know someone right now that's close to 70, 24/7 remote use, 24/7.
And it's still active. That's amazing.
And he knows it, but he can't get out. And that's kind of the concern of the eMK Ultra. I'm not sure how to tell someone how to get out of that. This may be a new ball game, and we're going to have to figure out how it works and how somebody can get out of it. Amazing. Because you're right, with the old trauma-based mind control, the human spirit exerts itself at some point, some reason, and it can vary. But as far as what some have said about, at 30 you're done, in my early 30s, they were adding a whole new program. I mean, this is a different deal now. And I believe you can use someone till the end of their days.
Yeah.
If the circumstances are right.
I see.
Depends.
That seems to be a common thread with the individuals that I've worked with, is that the stronger their spirit is and the more they are devoted to their spiritual development in whatever way they see fit, whether that's Christ or what have you, the more healing that takes place within them. Total healing. And so I find that to be a very interesting common denominator, because our spirit, we have no idea really, even if you're awake and aware and have a spiritual practice, I feel like we don't have any idea how amazing our spirits and our consciousness, our eternal consciousness actually is. It's very powerful.
That's been a problem for decades in MK Ultra. Mm-hmm. That pesky human spirit, that somebody wakes up. And I believe that's, in my case, that's why they started, I don't know when they started, but I believe they started even programming how the deprogramming would happen to try to keep it safe. Really what they're trying to do is kill the person before enough information comes out. Suicide, self-destruct, sound crazy, get thrown away and medicated somewhere. But I do believe they've now looked, for some time, they've looked into, for decades, they've looked into actually controlling that process as well.
Which is what CERN is all about. They're trying to find that God spark, that glue that we have that is our very creation. And they cannot replicate that. They cannot destroy it altogether, and they cannot replicate that. Because as evil or demonic entities that they are, they don't have the power of creation. And I don't think they have the wherewithal to understand what God's creation is actually all about. I think that's where the frustration.
That's where the entities come in.
Yeah.
The entities that I know are absolutely the most intelligent, clever, deceptive, way beyond what we think. I mean, what we think of as deception pales in comparison. I mean, these things have been around for a long, long time through various civilizations and epochs in our life. They're still around. So that's where that comes through. And my only concern really is that, I know there's a lot of us that, a lot of people seem to be waking up, but the human populace is in general isn't. I mean, we saw that in the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. Look what happened in the last 3 years. It was like watching a Twilight Zone episode, and it's just begun. And so what I'm saying is, don't look at this as just humans. It's not just humans. These ones at the top of what they're doing here, we call them the elite, the powers that can be, the network, the whatever. They're fully possessed. Those souls they're on the outside now. Okay. And it's another being that is running those people. And so you've got that intelligence, that cleverness, that level of deception working. against us. So, people got to get busy. I mean, there's no time. You think what just happened the last 3 years, what's coming up very soon? Brace yourself, because we just began. And this is going to be a process, and we can all continue to wake up, but we got to get busy.
Right.
If we're not getting busy with this, we're not going to make a difference. It doesn't matter if we just have a ton of information. They don't care how much information you have. It's what you do with it. So you're right. This is a spiritual war we're in. It's always been a spiritual war. And when I say Christ and Christianity, it's a very different view of what you would find if you walk into a church. It's not a religion. It's not there's no church, but it is an education of the true cosmology of our world, our history, and the true metaphysics, what that really looks like, what we are available to do right now, in this level of consciousness, with this level of ability and skill. We're up against it, and it's barreling down. So I have to say that's my mission to get people stirred up to start looking. But I need to put that in there. It's yeah.
So I think in that same vein, let's move into the topic of UFOs, because my personal belief is that, and I would love your take on this, and your take as well as what's happening in the media, is that a good portion of these sightings or UFOs that we're now seeing over and over again, when before it's been shunned and we don't want to address this, is that these are actually potentially interdimensional beings or demonic type of energies that are now being foisted upon us. What is your take and experience with alien programming and what you know about the UFO agenda?
Absolutely. I did not have brotherly aliens helping me out. Nobody helped me out. None of them helped me out. They were all working for these dark forces. My understanding is this. There are elementals that have been drawn to the dark side. There are reasons why. I'm not going to try to go into all that, but it's been over several hundred years. And they made a choice. Some of them made a choice to go work for the Ahrimanic and the esoteric because they didn't like the path that we were on, that humanity had chosen. They used to work for us. The grays, the reptiles, even in my opinion, even the Pleiadians, the whole bit, those are elementals. Even the ships can be elementals. So you get this crossover, the Bigfoot. It's there, it's not there, we can't find it, that kind of thing. Every once in a while it manifests physically, right? And it's actually hardcore physical. I just had a sighting in Taos, 2 weeks ago, right over the driveway. Massive ship. And it left a row of 17 lights on one side. When you looked up, you saw nothing but the sky and the cosmos because they're cloaked. And I believe that was actually a case where it's ours. Okay. These are not all from some star system or from another dimension. We have had that technology. The Russians have had that technology. This has been proven that at the end of World War II, they had something called the Bell in Germany, and we came in and the Russians came in and we split everything up, whoever got there first. I mean, we've had this technology for a long time. So it's not all that other thing. Some of it, I believe, is. I mean, you look in the daytime, you look at the clouds, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Sean Boutreau, but he did phenomenal work on this. Look him up online. Okay. What is in the clouds that's cloaked? So to me, they are adversarial. They are working for the other side. I had a lot of interaction with grays and reptiles throughout all of the programming, deep deprogramming that showed up in force. And let me tell you when they stopped showing up. when I realized what they were.
Mhm.
As soon as I knew what they were, the jig was up. Never had another experience.
I
Never
think a
showed
lot
up
of
again.
people are going to get suckered in to the agenda via Project Bluebeam because they find it fascinating, and oh, I was abducted by aliens, or I saw this, or I saw that. And I think that this is going to be just another thread that the globalists use to pull truthers in. It's just because so many people are interested in this type of phenomenon, and so they're going to
Well,
get suckered.
they've been indoctrinated. They've been totally, I mean, look at it. Look how long this has been going on. You know, people, I love when people talk about disclosure. It's like,
Oh, God.
disclosure. I mean, it's been disclosed for the last four decades.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, 4 or 5. I mean, it's been disclosed. Most people believe in it. They've taken polls, and you know, there's more people that believe that don't than not believe. So I think you're right. Whether Bluebeam is going to happen the way they originally planned or not, I don't know. If what I'm seeing is they are progressing with their agenda. There's no, the last 3 years proved that to me. That's end time. End time in MK Ultra for me means kicking it off on a global level, taking it to everybody.
Mhm.
And I said this years ago, I'm a microcosm of the macrocosm. They're coming for all of you now.
Mhm.
And that's what I see. So whether they utilize that or not, I don't know. Is it working the way they wanted to? That happens a lot. But the one thing you can guarantee is if they choose not to use that, they have 12 other things to do. They never do one thing. So, you know, the whole media thing, I think it kind of got, at least in our circles, the whole, what TSSA or whatever came out, you know, with that Elizondo, who is all these ex-CIA and military, you know, running this UFO thing. I think maybe they screwed up there. It was too obvious. And then they brought in that rocker from the band to be their front man. And I think it just, poor guy, mind controlled. I think there's a possibility that they may do that, but I think they may do something else. So,
Yeah.
but just to throw this out there, there's something coming the end of this year, beginning of next. I knew it a few months ago, and I just got kind of validated through some of Cliff High's work with his webbot. And I don't know the remote viewers that, you know, they had on a show together, but it validated for me that something is going to unfold. The next level is going to unfold possibly the end of this year into the first of next. So I don't know what it's going to be.
We really have to have spiritual discernment.
Oh my goodness.
Extreme spiritual discernment, because so many people are going to be fooled, whether it's through this tentacle or that one. Their net is wide and
Very.
vast, and so we have to be aware of all these different angles so that we can stay solid in our own spiritual understanding and balance.
And I think it's important, you know, some friends have said, oh, it's too technical. And it's like, get over that. Okay,
Yeah.
start educating yourself, because the series of books that Alana Freeland wrote, I really promote that. And the reason I do is she has done a tremendous, this is all footnoted. This is not theory. 500-600 footnotes in a book, you know.
Wow.
And this is about what they have done to the earth, to the atmosphere, to us. They are attempting, maybe they've succeeded, but to turn it all into one big machine. I mean, the number of satellites, the NexRads, the cell towers, you know, the personal tech that we're walking around with now, all of it. It is part of one big massive system. It's called full spectrum dominance. That's the name of it on the military documents that they wrote up, was full spectrum dominance. And it's important for people to understand that aspect as well as the spiritual, because this is what we're up against. There's constant influence. We live in a soup of electromagnetic energy.
Yes.
It is called the cloud, folks. Okay, we've got the Internet of Things. There's the Internet of Bodies. I mean, they're rolling it all out. And my feeling is that there will, well, this is what my alter said when we first started waking up, and she wanted to shout it for a good first year and a half. And that was, this is how it's going to happen. You're going to get up one day and you're going to go about your business like every other day, and you're not going to know that you lost your free will and your choice.
I believe
And
that.
what I'm seeing happening around me
Mhm.
is resonating with that. You know, the tech, get off the tech all the time. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. Look what we're doing with it. It's wonderful. Know what you're dealing with here. You know, when you go to get on it, know what you're dealing with. And put your smartphone away. Go for a hike without your smartphone. Here's an idea. Well, I know I sound critical, but I'm out there. I'm absolutely stunned at people stopping on the trail to text in the middle of this magnificence. You know, the phone, the iPad, whatever, it's always there. Use it for good, and then put it away and turn it off at night. Unplug your Wi-Fi, okay? Because they're sending through the Wi-Fi. They're sending through the smartphone that you lay on your bed when you go to sleep. Put it in another room in an EMF bag in a drawer and turn it off. Take the battery out if you have to. This stuff, I'm telling you, matters. It matters. The astral is the new field of war, and it has been for a couple of decades. And this person I mentioned earlier, his name's Ron Allen, and he wrote a book on this. The guy that's close to 70 and 24/7, he knows what's going on because he's living it. And this is the new way it's going to be, a remote, high-tech slavery. And the only way we're going to combat that is educate yourself. You said it, discernment, spiritual and otherwise, and say no. You got to start saying no. This isn't going to be comfortable.
No.
This isn't going to be like, oh, well, we'll just go from this comfort zone to that comfort zone. You're going to have to give up some things. That's the way major change happens. And we're really facing that now. I'm adamant about that.
Have you heard anything about October 4th?
I believe, I can't say, I have no inside information. My feeling is that's the distraction.
Okay.
And what's coming is going to be later.
Okay, so let's explain what we're talking about a little bit. On October 4th, the word is that they are going to be sending frequencies through the cell phone that program individuals, activate or otherwise, but they're already doing that on a regular basis. And so the suggestion is that you turn off your phone on October 4th. Our suggestion, yes, is that you do that anyways.
But see, this is what doesn't make sense, because right now you can take your smartphone and put it next to graphene, and as soon as you turn your smartphone on, the graphene starts growing.
Right.
So, okay, maybe there is a bigger signal coming. My feeling, and some of the people I know who are very aware of things feel the same, that the October thing, I'm not saying anything against Jason Shirka, who put out a video because he was told to tell everybody, because I believe he believes that he's doing the right thing. But whoever told him, I don't know the source and I don't trust it. I believe that what's coming is later, personally. That's just my personal feeling. I could be wrong, so go ahead and turn everything off anyway. But they usually have, look over here while we're doing this. And if everybody thinks the October thing happened and everybody's okay, then everybody relaxes and no big thing. I don't have to, I don't have to really do anything. I can go back to my life. And I believe it's going to be December into possibly January. And I have no idea what it is.
Two things. One, they're always doing test runs, so we always have to be mindful of that. And secondly, you just mentioned classic Freemasonic modus operandi. Everybody look over here while the hand behind the jacket is really doing the nefarious work. So we always have to keep that in mind and not get pulled into false flags and overreact emotionally, when really we have to keep our spirit and our consciousness, our mind totally aware of the fact that this could just be a distraction and preparation for something else.
Correct.
Okay. So what I would like to do, you've been so gracious with your information and your time. Will you end us on a healing note? What can we do to be mindful of what's coming? How do we keep our spirits strong and develop discernment? Whatever words of encouragement you would like to leave us with, I would appreciate that, because we always want to end these deeper, harder conversations with light and healing in mind.
Well, first of all, nobody's alone in this anymore. We're all in the game. So you're not alone. You can do this. I would say do absolutely everything in your power to remain human. So maybe you need to sit down and think about, what does it mean to be a human being? I mean, what is that really all about? That's about love and connection. It's about compassion for your neighbor. It's about being brother in a brotherhood, that we help each other out. We've become very isolated, and I think that is a danger now, that we need to move into some sense of community, family, whatever it works. But remaining human is super important, and people probably don't know what I mean, but if you're too, maybe make a list, make a list of, this is what it means to be human. This is what I do and what I think I'm supposed to do, and see where you can cross over those two things. Spend less time on tech. Spend what you need to. It has its purpose. I do not believe that tech is evil in and of itself. I believe that it has been weaponized, as everything gets weaponized. So maybe spend less time on tech. Create a discipline for yourself of, I'm going to go sit outside, or I'm going to go take a walk, and I'm going to sit down and just clear my mind and let things come in, let go of some things, let some things come in, start building a strength inside, because I can say that is how I got out. That's only how I got out. Yes, I had support. I had a person to talk to, but it was by building my inner life and taking back my soul forces. Look up the word sovereignty, because I don't think people really understand what it means. And we need to move, each of us, towards sovereignty, because this is a big thing out here. It's very, very big and very powerful. But if you have sovereignty, true sovereignty, it's much less powerful. And you're also creating, if you have true sovereignty, you're creating something for the future of all of us, not just ourselves. There's people out here suffering. I mean, homeless, don't even get me started. Find a way to get out of what's going on with you each day. Go do something anonymously. I mean, these things actually change us. They really do change us. They change our mind, they change our heart, and ultimately they can change us physically. So yeah, remain human. Find out what that means and take action.
I just feel like we should sit with that right here. What a beautiful way to end. I want to thank you, Elisa E, so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience with us. I hope everybody in the comment section will be gracious and kind. If you have a differing opinion, that's certainly okay. I just ask that you be respectful about it and provide facts. That is a simple thing to do, I believe. If you would like to read Lisa's book, I would suggest that you get that. You can find it on Amazon. It is definitely up there with Kathy O'Brien's book, Bryce Taylor's book. This is going to give you a step-by-step walkthrough of Elisa's journey to discovering what had been going on in her past, and she walks through the healing process. So thank you again so much. For those of you who would like to reach out, if you need to contact me, I am at galacticstoryteller@gmail.com. On Rumble, you can find my backup channel, Eden Rocks. That's EDENROCKS. You guys have a fantastic day. Be kind to one another and develop your spiritual sovereignty. That is the only way through this. Go
If I
ahead. Last
throw
word.
one more thing, just one more thing. You can get it on Amazon, but if you buy it at logosophiabooks.com, I get more, and my publishers, who are super small, magnificent people in North Carolina, get more out of it. So if you can afford to, if not, go to Amazon, you'll get it a little less.
Thank you for mentioning that, because I actually ordered it through Logosophia and spent time talking with him. So,
oh, he told me about you. Yeah.
oh, did he?
Yeah, totally. No,
Such
it's just
nice
nice, it's small business, let's start. That's another way we can start moving out of this crazy corporate world.
I will include that in the description box. So logosophia.com, correct?
Logosophiabooks.com.
Sophia Books. Okay, I'm writing that down. I will include that in the description. Please, if you can, purchase her book there. So anything else, Elisa?
All good. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Madeline. I appreciate the invite.
Sure. Take care.
And thank you for your work.
Oh, yes. Thank you. See you in the next video, everyone.